2026 is a huge year for the Alpine Formula One team, which held its launch on the MSC World Europa cruise ship. You can see behind us a spectacular venue, a very old school launch. And John, a team with great ambitions this year. They've thrown everything at this year, and central to that is that decision, the gamble, to ditch its own in-house power unit programme and switch to Mercedes.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a very old school launch, reminding me of the launches in the kind of 90s and 2000s. Big event, lots of people, showpiece, spectacular almost, and some strong messaging from the team boss, which doesn't often happen. Flavio Briatore, their executive advisor, was quite simple. He says, if we do a bad job this year, it's our fault, because we've got everything we need. We've got the infrastructure in place, we've got the budget in place, we've got the staff in place, and most importantly, they've resolved one of their biggest problems of last year, which was a lack of power. They've switched, got rid of shut down, in fact, the Renault Works engine project, have gone Mercedes customer power units, and they think this is the step that will push them towards the front of the grid.
Now, I would say it's a pragmatic decision. I would say a team would never voluntarily shut down its power unit programme without a very, very good reason, and the reason in this case is that Renault Viri, for one reason or another, ever since the change of power unit regulations back in 2014, when the 1.6 litre V6 turbo hybrid engines came in, they've struggled. They've had their moments, but it's never been a consistently strong market-leading engine. And it's basically an admission from Renault that they can't crack it. So once you accept that they can't crack it, this is the better decision. But a lot of teams would balk at the idea of having to do this. But I guess that tells you where Alpine is, that actually getting rid of that programme that's a bit of a millstone that they were dragging around is a positive, and actually with Mercedes lays the foundation for what, if everything goes right, could be a much improved year this year.
Yeah, it's a decision that probably never would have been taken by anyone who'd grown up with the Renault Works engine, a decision that wouldn't have been made by anyone from Viri. This was Flavio Briatore who came in, and with Luca De Meo together, they made this decision. The mission that Flavio had was to get Alpine to the front of Formula One, and if you can sense an engine project's very expensive, if you can sense it's not going to be as competitive as potentially as a Mercedes unit that's helped a customer team like McLaren win the World Championship, you've got to make this tough decision to be successful in Formula One. Flavio's not afraid to make tough decisions. He took criticisms for it. But if the Mercedes is as quick as everyone suspects it to be, if it continues to be as reliable as we have seen it to be this week, then this is a decision that, there will have been criticisms, but it will deliver everything they hope for.
And of course, McLaren has shown what you can do as a customer team by winning both championships last year. I think championships are a little bit beyond Alpine at this stage, but they want to be on a road, a pathway back to being able to do that. But it also will lay bare any problems they've still got on the team side, the chassis side, the end stone side, won't it? Because they've got the same engine as at least two of the teams are expecting to be at or near the front, McLaren and Mercedes, plus a very, very handy other customer team in Williams.
Yes, there's many elements and benefits to it. One of which Flavio mentioned was that when they stuck their car in the wind tunnel on the 2nd of January this year, all the focus was on aero, maximising the aero concept. They didn't have to worry about the power unit, what it was going to be, how it was going to fit around their chassis. They didn't have to worry about the gearbox. These are elements they've taken. So all their concentration has been on the aero, so they've got that. And I think another core element as well at this stage of a rule set that's going to be very complicated. Teams don't know where the performance drivers are going to be, how quickly they can get on top of energy deployment, how quick they can master energy recovery. What teams need now is mileage. And the impression that we have so far is the Mercedes is running as well as you can expect. Mercedes did 200 kilometres at their shakedown, the maximum you're allowed. Alpine did 140 kilometres, but that was impacted by the weather. It was pouring down at Silverstone earlier in the week. In the end, they delayed running hoping for a break in the weather. It didn't happen, so they had to run, and then they got off with the light was fading, and Pierre Gasly said, I can't carry on. So if you can get that mileage, and David Sanchez, their technical director, told us today, it gives us confidence. It gives us confidence that we can go into Barcelona and with our big job list and tick everything off, because that car's not going to be stuck in the garage every 10 minutes.
Yeah, and their messaging was very clear, wasn't it? They didn't say we're going to go out and win races, but they said we will be competitive. Briatore was talking about regularly in the points, kind of P6, P7. So for a team that was last year, and a pretty clear last, that's a big statement. And ultimately, some of it can come from the decisions that were made last year, because as Briatore said, last year's problems were rooted in 24. They couldn't change everything they wanted to on the 25 cars. They just did kind of what they could and then said, we are absolutely all in on 26. So 25 was a failure on track, but 25 could be a success if the 26 car is as good as they expect it to be.
Yeah, Flavio talked about, I asked him, you say if you do a bad job, it's your fault. Well, what do you consider a bad job? What do you consider a good job? He said a bad job would be what we did last year. And I think if they do what happened last year, then I don't know where this team goes from there, because they have sacrificed development for 12 months. They have, in theory, got the best engine. They have got the sponsors. So there'll be some big questions asked. But I think it's a team that, to make these bold declarations about moving forward, Flavio said, as you mentioned, top 6, top 7, consistent points, sniffing podium finishes if they can on the good days. For a team that finished 10th, that's quite ambitious. And this has been a launch period where teams haven't said very much about kind of where they expect to be, what their potential is, what would they consider to be a good job and expectation. So it's quite, says something, a bit of a statement from Alpine that there are some clear targets laid down. The stakes in cybersecurity keep rising, and the standards haven't kept up. So Arctic Wolf is raising them, not just for business, but for the cybersecurity industry. Arctic Wolf's AI-powered SOC is built to detect, stop, and recover from threats before they get in your way. So you can focus on what's ahead, while we focus on what could slow you down.
What is also interesting about this team is we've reflected on the positive potential, and it could go well. It could also go badly, and that would be a real kick in the teeth for this team, wouldn't it? Because they've worked so hard on this car. There is a mood of optimism, but that optimism would dissolve very, very quickly if they end up in Australia or even realise it in testing that they're struggling. So there's an enormous amount at stake for this project, because it's hard to see. I mean, Renault is still the majority owner of this team. It's hard to see the team continuing in this form if this whole Flavio Briatore era doesn't actually show it's progressing. So there is still the potential for some good old-fashioned Alpine chaos if things don't go as they should.
Yeah, Flavio said no excuses. We have to perform this season. And I think if they don't perform, they have to look at themselves. They have to look at what was lacking. Why didn't it perform? And having that benchmark of Mercedes will be such an invaluable aspect to them. Because it's all very well thinking that, we've got an engine that's 3 tenths slower last year. We were within 3 or 4 tenths of the front, therefore the chassis is great. But that's not quite how it works in Formula One. We saw in the McLaren era, in the Honda years, they were absolutely convinced they had the best chassis. Bolt a better engine in, it gets brilliant. That's not what happened. It exposed other weaknesses in the system. So this will be a year, it will prove whether Flavio's correct, that all those elements are in place and you can go forward. He's not saying that Alpine can be fighting for wins. He said we just need to build the foundations. This is solid ground. This is the first Alpine that has come under him, first Alpine under this team. So there are a lot of elements to push it forwards, but it needs to push forwards. Otherwise, there's some lot deeper soul searching about just what that team needs to get nearer the front.
And that's the big question. Is it a little bit too early? Because this team's been through a lot of changes. There's been a lot of people leaving, comings and goings, changes of leadership, changes in the rank and file as well. Still lots of very, very good people there. But when you have that instability, those constant changes, those difficult times, you don't get that kind of sustained year on year progress. So that's the one doubt in my mind. Even if they do everything right and the car is as good as they can get it, what's the overall potential of that team in terms of the facilities and the way it works?
But I think what's different, if this was during a consistent rules era and you'd made these changes, you'd swapped engines and pushing forward, then I think it's much harder to make progress because you're going up against teams that understand packages better, they've exploited the rules better than you because you were behind them. But this is all new rules, these are all new cars, all new concept, a totally different Formula One to what we've expected. And a lot of the early stage of the season will be about who's understood the cars better, who's understood energy management in qualifying and in races, who's understood where the key aero performance drivers are coming, who's understood that transition between straight line mode and corner mode and how you balance the wings for maximum effect at each race. So if you can go into this season switched on, understanding all those various elements then I think you can make a much bigger leap than would be possible in any other era. So I think this is perhaps why they feel it's there. They've had a long run up to this. They've switched off development so early last year. They've been thinking about it. They've been working on it. All those ingredients are in place. So if they don't make a step, then you really do have to ask, what is going on and what do they actually need to move forward? Because on paper, everything is there.
The definition of a clean sheet of paper, isn't it? And you do have to say the fact that things are running well now, unlike Williams, who have to miss that first test, is already a win for them. So that says this is a team that at least is doing that element of the job very, very effectively, very efficiently. We'll get an idea in testing how competitive they are. And then, of course, we know in Pierre Gasly they've got a driver who has won a Grand Prix, who's been consistently strong in F1's midfield over the past few years, plus Franco Colapinto, question marks over him, but I think nobody doubts there's a driver with a high ceiling there. So there's a lot of people with a lot at stake here. And I think more than any other team, actually, the window of how well it could do or how badly it could go is still very, very wide. I don't really know where to place them other than to say it would be unrealistic to expect them to be fighting for the championship, say.
Yeah, I don't think even they're expecting to fight for the championship. There was not a single mention here about fighting for wins. I think what they've seen so far are the positive signs of a project that's coming together and making those steps. We saw McLaren move from a team, remember those times in Bahrain where they were absolutely miles off the pace. And this was a team really struggling, but it made steps, it pulled itself together, weaknesses were exposed, and it shifted forwards, and it unlocked answers for a rule set that gave an advantage. With Alpine, it's going to be a journey to the front. It's not going to happen instantly this season, but these should lay the foundations this year. And I think this year offers the opportunity to perhaps overreach a little bit if you can capitalise early on, if you can get the super strong reliability from Mercedes that gives you a head start. If you can get all your energy management questions answered in Barcelona testing, for example, you're streets ahead of Williams who aren't even there. So there are a lot of benefits that can be had if you can have a powerful, reliable power unit early on, get your answers in the bag with a car that's solid and potential to upgrade, and then you can push on from there.
And it's very much a case of good decisions made by Alpine. Can they deliver on them on track? We don't know the answer to that yet, but that's what 2026 is going to tell us.